Yeah, I'm going to start in a minute. Yeah.
Okay. I replaced the thermostat and I check it's working. It's fine. If it's losing the power again, I think it's the problem with some electrical issue.
Okay.
Not with the thermostat.
Got it.
Okay.
Got it. Okay.
Thanks for joining, everybody. We'll get started momentarily. For now, you can put yourselves on mute and we will get started soon.
You can start, Diana.
Do I have Dave Little on the line? I'll just give him, there he is. Hi, Dave. Welcome, everybody. Before I steal Dave's thunder, I will officially turn it over to Dave, our BIA LAV Vice President, to make some welcome remarks and facilitate our event today. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Diana, and definitely thanks to everyone for taking the time out of your busy schedule these days to
Dave, it could be on my end, but can you speak up a little? It's a little muffled, but it could be just me. Laura, can you hear Dave okay?
No, I agree. He's muffled.
Thanks, Richard.
Sorry about that. Let me. Is that better? I have two mics.
That's great. Thanks for fixing that.
Back and forth. Hey, apologize. Anyway, as I was saying, thank you to everybody for taking the time to meet with us and go through our economic outlook with the LAV chapter. I know everybody's got a really busy schedule right now, and that's hopefully what we'll hear is the good news from the presentation today is that everybody is in fact busy. I know we can certainly attest to that, and I look forward to the discussion after Dr. Green's remarks, where we have a chance to kind of react and see what it's doing for us. So anyway, thank you for being here. As always, thank you, Dr. Green, for being a part of this and leading the charge for us today. It's always wonderful to hear from you and to hear your insights and based on your vast experience, which we'll get into in a few minutes. We also want to thank our partnership sponsors for this event today. You've seen them on the flyer, and I'd like to give a special thanks to our presenting sponsor, the Southern California Gas Company, for their support as our presenting sponsor. And then without any further ado on that front, I'd like to introduce everyone to Rena Hackett from SoCal Gas to give us some quick opening comments.
Hello, everybody. So I just wanted to take a few moments to go over our energy efficiency new homes program. And let me find. Can everybody see my PowerPoint okay? Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So our energy efficiency new homes program, EENH. Again, my name is Rena Hackett. I'm the account executive for residential new construction with SoCal Gas. And we have this wonderful rebate program called EENH. So briefly going to go over it, just a couple minutes. Here's our single family gas measures. So we give rebate amounts to install energy efficient natural gas appliances. So here is our energy efficient requirements. And here is a great rebate amount you can get per unit. And then same with our space heating. We have laundry and bath. And we also have rebate amounts for our multifamily gas measures, which you can see is a water heater, boiler controls, furnaces, all those great things. So I only have a couple minutes to talk to you guys, but we have plenty of builder resources. And there are other account executives, my colleagues. We have Matt Noon, Lacey Couts, and Rena Hackett. We would be happy to set up short calls to go over our program, send you guidebooks, and be here in any way that we can. And that's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you, Rena. And again,
you.
thank you to the SoCal Gas Company for your support today. Awesome helping us make this a reality. We wanted to remind everybody that there will be a question and answer period at the end of our discussion today. So as things come to mind during Dr. Green's presentation, if you could just make a note and bring those up, we'll try to allow enough time at the end for everybody to voice their questions and allow this to be the open discussion that we all will benefit from. So appreciate you guys keeping that in mind. Also, we will also be doing a Builder Roundtable that'll be coming up. Diana will give us more information on that, but it'll also feature some of this information shared today. So there'll be another opportunity to learn and grow from the data that we hear in this economic outlook. Before we move on further, Diana, can you go over a few of the housekeeping items that you need to talk to us about, please?
Yeah, thanks again to everyone that's joined us, and for the folks that are continuing to trickle in. We have a really high RSVP rate today. Just remember to stay on mute if you're not speaking. And for the question and answer portions of today, you will have the chat feature function, or you can indicate that you have a question and I'll call on you so you can ask it. So either way, just make sure you put it in the chat. And please stay with us after Richard's presentation so we can hear from some of our builder members on their experience based on some of the things he shared with us.
Excellent. Thank you, Diana. Appreciate that as always. So now to get on to our main event, I'd like to welcome back Dr. Green to our BIA format here, and like to thank you up front for taking the time to be with us. I know many of us know and have heard Dr. Green speak in the past and have gained a lot from his insight. And so we're looking forward to doing that again today, Dr. Green. As many of you know, Dr. Green is well versed in what he does, dating back to initially he's got he earned his PhD in economics and a master's in economics from University of Wisconsin at Madison. He also has a degree in economics from Harvard University, and his research has encompassed many aspects of our housing industry in different markets, overall housing policy in the U.S., related tax policy in the U.S., transportation matters, mortgage finance, and urban growth as well. So again, full palette of knowledge in our business and what we do. He also has a book which he co-authored with Stephen Malpese, Primer on U.S. Housing Markets and Housing Policy, which is used nationwide at universities thoroughly. His work has been cited or even quoted directly in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, the Christian Science Monitor, the LA Times, Newsweek, and the Economist, as well as many other outlets, both digital and actual hard copy. So again, volume of information for us. Currently, Dr. Green serves at USC as not only a professor, but he's the director and chair of the USC Lusk Center for Real Estate. And he's the chair of the Wilbur H. Smith III Department of Real Estate Development. So with that intro, Dr. Green, I would love to turn the floor over to you and hear what you have to say. Take it away, sir.
Well, thank you, Dave. And when he talks about when people say I'm trying to remember the phrase he used, but he basically is saying I'm old. I've been around for a while. So
exactly.
I'm going to do something a little different today. Is last time I was with you, which was probably Diana, 4 or 5 months ago, I was kind of depressing because I talked about how things were going to get worse, and you know what, they did. And I felt like you wouldn't want to have me back again because I was pretty depressing, but you seemed to bring me back anyway. I'm far more optimistic now than I was 4 or 5 months ago. And the reason is simple, the vaccine, and it's working. I mean, if you see what's happening in Israel, the share of people, of the elderly who are seriously ill with COVID has dropped dramatically. And they've done an amazing job of basically getting all their old people fully vaccinated. And now they're working on something like 70% of people have gotten one shot and 20% of people have gotten both. And so this thing works. It's pretty clear the Pfizer vaccine works on the South African strain, which is something we were all very scared about. I'm happy to say my wife, who's a physician, has gotten both her shots. My parents have each gotten one. They're about 10 days away from getting their second. Okay, I said I was old. I wish I were about, I don't know about any, I'll bet nobody else when they were like 18 had an ID that said they were 3 years older. I'm guessing nobody else in this room had that. I now want an ID that says I'm actually about 4 years older. So I could go get the shot now. But the thing, it's really working. We are seeing big drops in the number of cases. Now, it's not clear to the extent to which this is the vaccination and to what extent it's other things. But I think we're going to open up this summer. And I also think that we are going to get some sort of stimulus, which is particularly important for the home building industry on the rental side, because it will include rental assistance. I don't know I mean, the Democrats are arguing among themselves about whether people who make 150,000 should get a check or whether people making 85,000 should get a check. And I think there are some operational issues involved in trying to cut it too finely. But at the end of the day, I don't think it actually matters that much. The point is, I do think we need another round of stimulus. It will happen. And I think between that and the vaccine, we are going to be roaring back this summer or at the latest this coming fall. So that's not all that interesting to talk about. So what I'm going to focus on is housing and a couple of things which I assume this audience is interested in, and a couple of things that I've noticed in the last really 2 to 3 weeks that I want to bring to your attention. And one of the great things about being in the housing business is, of course, among the real estate sectors, it is among the strongest. The strongest is cell phone towers. Second is industrial. Third is housing. Then, retail is a disaster. And I'm afraid it's going to be a disaster for the foreseeable future. I don't think this is just a COVID-related thing. Office is problematic. I do think it will come back, but it may be a while. And hotels, of course, some are doing okay, some are doing very badly. One of the interesting things is whether businesses are going to go back to putting people back on the road again. Based on past experiences where we've had reductions in travel, that's probably about 5 years out. After 9/11, it took 5 years for travel to recover. After the great financial crisis, again, it took about 5 years to recover. So I think really that business, 2025, 2026 before it's back. But housing is doing gangbusters, as we all know. And so the question is why? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the macro economy and housing. So that's a little bit of forecasting. And I'm also going to talk about home ownership, which is, I'm guessing, something that people in this group care a little bit about. So let me share my screen. And so the last time I talked to you, my presentation was entitled The Economy in the Time of COVID. This time I'm just going to talk about housing. And I'm going to talk about housing in 2 dimensions. I'm going to talk about, as I said, housing and the broader economy and what's happened to it. And what's happened to it is really problematic, and I'm about to show you that. And then about this issue that I've spent a lot of years caring about, which is tenure choice. What makes people decide to be homeowners? What leads them to decide to be renters? And what does that mean for the future of the composition of housing going forward? So I want to start with this, and I hope you can see the right side of the graph, because I'm actually going to, there we go. Okay, so I wrote a paper about 20 years ago, and I've been asked to rewrite it, called Follow the Leader, How Residential Investment Leads the Business Cycle. And it was published in 1998, and it basically said nothing forecasts the economy like housing. And by housing, I want to be very specific. What I mean is residential investment. It's not house prices, it's not rents, it's just building stuff. And as I said, I was asked to do an update of that. And so the first thing I did as part of updating that was create this graph. And what the blue line is real GDP going back to 1947, which is the first year that we measured real GDP in the National Income and Products Account. And then fixed private domestic investment residential, and that's the red line. Okay, what does that mean? It means new houses and it means home improvements. And for those of you who are interested, over the course of this period of time, in general, the breakdown between these two is about 2/3 of the capital put into the housing stock is new housing, and about 1/3 of it is home improvements, rehab, that kind of stuff. Okay. So what you can see is between the end of World War II and the Great Financial Crisis, housing was far more volatile than the broader economy. I don't think that will surprise anybody. You know, I've always said to home builders, if you guys could just get together and decide you're going to build 1.5 million houses a year and not build more, then we wouldn't have these crashes and all the world would be good. So you can see we've had periods where housing grew much more. It was a much bigger relative to 1947 than the broader economy. And now to some extent in the 70s, that was to some extent the baby boomers reaching household formation age and needing housing. But, you know, without the booms, we wouldn't have the busts. And well, now we don't have to worry about those booms, because if you look at what's happened to housing since the Great Financial Crisis, it collapsed relative to GDP. And it really hasn't recovered relative to GDP. So certainly it has recovered. So, and I want to make this clear. So we were only building in 2010, 50%, we were investing 50% more in housing than we were in 1947. But note the economy was 3.5 times bigger. So this is really depressed housing construction relative to the broader economy. And one thing you'll note is relative to that economy, it really hasn't caught back up again. Okay. And so this is a problem. Housing's lack of, and I know you all think, boy, things have been great the last couple of years, COVID notwithstanding, and they have been, but still we're not building very much housing. Okay, so why? Well, so the first thing is we say, well, people don't build housing if the price of housing isn't high enough, is right, the price has to be higher than construction cost to build housing. So surely there's a relationship between new construction and house prices. And so what we have is the blue line is real house prices. These are inflation adjusted house prices using the Federal Housing Finance Agency house price index. And that goes back to the mid 1970s. And against that, I have, again, new private housing units authorized by building permits. If I did residential investment, it will look pretty much the same. And one thing I want to call your attention to again is that they kind of move together. Again, the new construction, much more volatile. So basically, house prices move up a little bit and induces construction. Okay, but then, holy cow, we had this collapse with house prices, so that made sense. But again, if you look historically, that collapse is really monumental. And again, if you look at where we are with house prices here, we still haven't recovered fully. This is again real. This is on an inflation adjusted basis. We are still not back to 2006 house price levels. This is nationally. You would think under those circumstances, we'd be building at least as many houses as we were building back then. And we're not even close to that. So again, we are not building. So prices are not the issue. Okay. Oh, and this is again the same thing. This is fixed investment, and oh, there's a reason. Yeah, I wasn't going to show this graph because it's not set up quite right yet. Let's pass on this. I wanted to show you a different one. You know what? Let me find it real quick. That is the wrong slide. Let me get you the right slide.
As Richard looks for the slide, I would encourage folks to think of the questions they have when our Q&A comes up in.
Okay, I'm not going to search my computer for the slide right now, but if it's a slide of interest rates against housing construction. And one of the things we would think is that lower interest rates would stimulate housing construction. And currently interest rates are at historically low levels. And what we see is this weird pattern going really back 20 years where interest rates going up seem to lead to more housing construction and interest rates falling seem to lead to less. And even if you control for the health of the economy as a whole, we're not getting the stimulus from interest rates for new construction that was traditionally the way the Federal Reserve would actually stimulate new construction, is they would cut interest rates and you would see housing construction go up. That was the way they would get the economy to recover. We haven't seen that in 20 years now, where that relationship is basically severed. So what's going on here? We have prices saying that we should have more construction. We have interest rates saying we should have more construction. It has to be on the other side. It is that there are impediments to new construction that weren't in place in the 60s and 70s. And we know what those impediments are, right? Now, you think California is unique in this regard. It is not. It is probably more severe in this. In fact, I know it's more severe. But in places that for years you would call libertarian leading places, it's become much harder to build houses. In Austin, Texas, it has become much harder to build houses. In Atlanta, it's become much harder to build houses. And what do I mean by much harder? I mean that zoning is getting tougher and tougher. Getting rezoned is getting tougher and tougher. So the ability to just by right build houses is getting more difficult throughout the country. So what I would say to you as home builders is one of the things you might want to talk to people about is this is not just about housing. This is about an output gap in the macro economy that is preventing the economy from behaving as well as it otherwise might behave. That there's real cost to GDP by not allowing housing to respond to the sorts of stimuli that it usually responds to. So that's part one of the presentation. Just, you all know we're not building enough. We're really not building enough. And we haven't been for, it's really 12 or 13 years now. Okay, you could argue that 2008, 2009, 2010, you were recovering. There was some overbuilding before the great financial crisis, so you were sopping up some of that overbuilding. But since 2010, I mean, it's absurd how little housing we're building. And this is something we should be broadly concerned about as we think about the macro economy. Okay, the other thing I want to talk to you about today is tenure choice and sort of what are the elements that make people homeowners and how are they changing and what might this mean for the country going forward? So I'm going to decompose this into a number of things. And one of the things I want you to recognize is I'm controlling for a whole bunch of other things while I am showing you these different contributors. So this is not just looking at the homeownership rate among 90-year-olds and 70-year-olds and 30-year-olds. This is looking at the homeownership rate, the predilection for homeowning after controlling for people's race, their income, their educational status, et cetera. I'm going to talk about each of these for a few minutes because of what they say about homeownership going forward. Now, the way to look at this graph is this says, what is your likelihood of being a homeowner relative to being a 20-year-old? Okay, so that's why 20 is 0. So what it's saying is, and this is based on California data. So this is specific to California. This is from the 2019 American Community Survey, which is the most recent ACS data available. So we're looking at individual households here. That's the other thing, is we're not looking at totals and trying to infer from total rates of 50-year-olds, just looking at their homeowner. We're looking at every individual 50-year-old. Okay. So what this is saying is a 25-year-old is 8 percentage points more likely to be a homeowner than a 20-year-old. An 80-year-old is 45 points more likely to be a homeowner than a 20-year-old, et cetera. Okay. Now, One of the things here that surprises people is you might say, well, don't people, once they're in their 80s, like go into nursing homes or rent or something like that? And yes, that does happen. But remember, we're controlling for things, and including a very important thing, which is marriage. 80, 85, and 90-year-olds are very often singles because they're widowed. And the ratio of widows to widowers is about 9 to 1. So I'll say widowed. So that's why that's going to pull their overall homeownership rate down if you look at 90-year-olds. But if you look at just a 90-year-old per se, all else equal, they're 50 percentage points more likely to be a homeowner in California than a 20-year-old is. Okay. So what do we know? The population is getting older. So that's going to tend to put upward pressure on homeownership. Okay. Now, this is my favorite one. This is about marriage. And what it says is legal marriage really matters a lot. So this is propensity to be a homeowner relative to being a single person. And there are 4 categories here. And I know they're a little opaque, but OSMC is for opposite sex married couple. SSMC is for same sex married couple. OSNMC is for opposite sex non-married couple, and SSNMC is for same-sex non-married couple. So these are, we're looking at people in their households and how they're living and then correlating that to home ownership, again, after controlling for all the other stuff that I'm showing you. One thing I should note is we're even controlling for things like what part of the city do you live in, because like if you live in San Francisco, you're much less likely to be a homeowner, all else being equal, than if you live in Fresno. So we're taking all of that into account as well. Okay. And what do you see here? Opposite sex married couples are 13 percentage points more likely to be homeowners than single people are. Same sex married couples are about 9 percentage points more likely to be homeowners than single people are. These are very statistically significant as we use that phrase. And again, we're controlling for things. We're saying, yeah, you're saying, well, maybe it's financial capacity. No, we're controlling for people's incomes, for example. When we look at this, we're controlling for people's level of schooling. Now, I'm not going to show you level of schooling in the results because it's not very interesting. As you're not going to be surprised to know college graduates are more likely to be homeowners than high school dropouts. They are. But look at those people who are living together, who are shacking up. And I have no objection to shacking up. My wife and I shacked up for 4 years before we got married 37 years ago. So, but they don't become homeowners. That same-sex non-married couple, they look like they're more likely to be homeowners a little bit, but that's not, as it turns out, it's not statistically different from 0. And opposite sex non-married couples, again, it's not, actually this one is statistically significant, or slightly less likely to be homeowners than single people are. So a lot of homeownership is about marriage. So what's going on with marriage? Well, here's what's going on with marriage. We're marrying much less than we used to. So on the left, and this is from a group called the Institute for Family Studies, you can see, I find the green line in particular of interest. The number of years you can, because these are prime homeowning years, well, not 15, but expected number of years spent in marriage between the ages of 15 and 50. Okay, so think about, so again, I will give my own case. I was married 25 years between the ages of 15 and 50. We got married when we were 25. We stayed married, so that's 25 out of 50 years we were married over that period of time. Okay, if you go back to 1960, which is people born in 1960, which is, again, is like me, that 25 years is sort of standard behavior. Okay, we're now down to less than 15 years. So the share of years that you're married between the ages of 15 and 50 has gone down by 40% in the last 60 years. That is an enormous change. The flip side of this is if you look at, and again, this won't surprise anyone, I don't think, average age of first marriage, it is rising very rapidly. And so the question is it just that people are getting married later, or are they not going to get married at all? Well, one of the things we can see is if you look at the share of women who have never been married at age 35 now compared to 20 years ago, it's 20 percentage points higher. And the best evidence we have is that it's women who are deciding not to marry, not men. And there's a particularly important reason why, which is women are about 7 percentage points more likely to have a college degree. Young women, women between the ages of 25 and 40, are about 7 percentage points more likely to have a college degree than men. This is in California, about 42% of women between the ages of 25 and 40 have a college degree, about 35% of men do. Those are actually high numbers by national standards, just we're a better educated state than most. We're not the top of the list, that's Maryland. But we're pretty well educated, and the Bay Area is a lot of the reasons for that. The Bay Area is extraordinarily well educated, but the point is, women are better educated than men are. Women of the marriageable years are better educated than men are. And one of the things we observe in data is women with college degrees are not interested in marrying men who don't have college degrees. And it goes a step further even that women with high school degrees are really not interested in marrying men without college degrees. And the reason for that is women marry for, I mean, again, this sounds so unromantic, but we observe it in data. Women marry for economic reasons. And it used to be you could have a high school diploma and do well economically. It's much harder. You still can, but it's much harder than it used to be. There are economists at MIT, Esther Duflo and David Otter, who've studied this very carefully. When a factory shuts down in a town that's a factory town, the ability of men to find spouses drops precipitously at that point. And so this is an issue for homeowning, because as I showed you before, marriage is a critical component of whether people become homeowners or not. And we're seeing a decline in marriage. And I don't think that's going to change for the reason I just gave. What about ethnicity? Well, when we look at, one of the reasons we might think California has a relatively low homeownership rate is that we are more diverse than pretty much anywhere else. You could argue that Queens and New York is, and a few other places. Houston is actually a remarkably diverse place. And so this is the impact of ethnicity on the likelihood of being a homeowner. And what may surprise people, so you can see people of Chilean heritage, as they self-identify in the census, are actually more likely to be homeowners than others, than non-Hispanic whites. Colombians less likely, Peruvians less likely, Nicaraguans and Puerto Ricans, other groups like Hondurans and Salvadorans, there's not a statistical difference, and that could be because of paucity of data, among other reasons. But you can see Mexicans, while they are less likely to be homeowners than the general population after controls, again, they look very similar to everybody else. Okay, so that may surprise people. What's going on there? Why do they look so similar? Well, we're controlling for income. The income of Mexicans tends to be lower. We're looking at citizenship. Citizenship is another important predictor of homeowning. Is people who are not citizens. So interestingly enough, naturalized citizens are slightly more likely to become homeowners than native-born Americans. But those without citizenship, it's not particularly surprising. About 13 percentage points less likely to be homeowners. And educational attainment. Now, the interesting thing is my colleague Dal Myers has pointed out that by the age of 35, a Mexican immigrant without a high school diploma makes about the same income as an American born in the US with a high school diploma. So it does reflect the ambition of immigrants, I think, but nevertheless, it's still, because of that lack of educational attainment, there tends to be lower income, which I think is one of the reasons you're seeing at least a little bit of lower. No. Even after controls, we have a little difference. When you take these things into account, though, you don't see very much of a difference. But I mean, figuring out the Mexican market in California is pretty important if you want to be selling houses to people. Okay. And now race. And in a world of diversity, equity, and inclusion rising to the top of our radar screens as long it should, it's really striking here differences in homeownership rate across races. Now, again, this is after controlling for, did you finish college? Are you married? How much money do you make? Where do you live? And so on. And you can see the homeownership rate among African Americans is 13 percentage points lower than it is for members of other racial groups as defined by the census. I found it interesting. If you look at Native Americans, they're not statistically different from white people. That's why they're not here. That could be a positive data. Asians slightly higher than white people. Native Hawaiians, I just found it, this just popped out, less likely, other slightly less likely, and more than one race slightly less likely. But you do have this issue of African American homeownership lagging after taking into account all these other things. So what's going on there? Well, I think there's really important research from a guy named Mike Erickson at the University of Cincinnati who shows that the number one predictor of whether somebody becomes a homeowner is whether their parent is a homeowner. And I think, you know, we don't really know the mechanism, but I suspect is if you grow up as a homeowning family, you're going to kind of know that it's nice to grow up as a homeowning family, and you're going to learn some of the stuff that goes into being a homeowner. So as I'm sure many of you know, FHA VA programs explicitly excluded people of color in general and Black people in particular through redlining maps. And what it means is that if your parents, who otherwise might have been a homeowner, if they could get an FHA loan, but they couldn't get an FHA loan, and you're a kid, you're less likely to be a homeowner just through that channel. So this is a very long-lasting phenomenon. At the same time, subprime crisis caused disproportionate homeownership losses among Black families. And now, I mean, I would say, you know, it sort of disappeared again, but 6 months ago was probably the best time to buy a house in years because interest rates fell so much and prices hadn't yet responded. If we look at where prices are right now and look at the total payment people make, including insurance and property taxes, we're kind of back where we were 6 months ago. House prices have gone up 10%. Interest rates go from 4 to 2.5. If you run that math, your payment is pretty much back where it was before, which is, by the way, why I don't think house prices are going to go up a whole lot more from where they are right now. I don't think they're going to fall, but I don't think they're going to go up a whole lot more. But what was the key to getting a mortgage 6 months ago was having a job. And again, Black families were disproportionately thrown out of work by the COVID crisis. And so, you know, you've had this series of things, cycle after cycle after cycle, that have put African Americans at a disadvantage with respect to homeowning. So if you're looking for where home buyers are going to come from, one thing I will tell you, it's not really non-Hispanic white people. The homeownership rate among non-Hispanic white people is 72, 73%. They're kind of tapped out. They're homeowners as much as they're going to be homeowners. The people who are left over are, again, unmarrieds. So, you know, thinking about how do you make unmarried people homeowners is something that's worth thinking about, perhaps. Older folks who, again, have left that home they lived so many years in, although they are holding, a student of mine in Lena Jude has done this really great study, which shows that boomers are hanging on to their homes for dear life way more than past generations did, which is the other reason why you don't have supply available that normally you would. And so you're not going to get business from non-Hispanic white people. That's not going to be a source of growth in the years to come. And so I think it's good that diversity, equity, and inclusion has seen its profile rise, not only from a moral perspective, but also from a business perspective, because this is where the opportunities lie for selling houses to people. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions. Let me stop sharing my screen. Okay, why aren't you? Hang on, please. For some reason, it doesn't want me to unshare here. Actually, I know something I can do to, there we go.
All right. Thank you again, Dr. Green, for those insights and your comments, and again for joining us today. This concludes our forecast presentation, and now we're going to be moving to a panelist discussion, which
Hey,
we're
Dave,
excited.
I think that this is a good time to stop for Q&A based on Dr. Green's presentation, if anyone has questions right now.
Yeah, I don't know if you could hear me.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so Diana, we were gonna introduce Alyssa and Christy real quick.
Yeah, do you think we want to wait for folks in case they have questions on what Dr. Green presented on?
Sure, we can do
Okay.
that.
Great. I don't see any questions in the chat right now, but if anyone does have a question, they can feel free to put it in the chat or just unmute themselves. Laura, do our folks have the ability to unmute themselves?
I have a question.
Sure,
Dr.
Renee.
Green, what does he expect in terms of foreclosures when the COVID relief protections expire? I'm starting to see in some resale markets, some foreclosures.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that big a deal because people have so much equity in their houses. And the equity is not just from appreciation, although some of it is what we just had. Underwriting became so much tougher that the people who got loans were very low risk borrowers. The Urban Institute, they've done great work on this. And so that doesn't mean I don't think there will be foreclosures, there will be, but it's going to be much, much smaller than what we saw 11, 12 years ago. The other thing I'll note is one of the things about Fannie Freddie ability to defer payments is what you owe is now, you do not owe until the mortgage is due. So that means there's not going to be pressure on people to sell in order to make up for past payments. And so it's just extraordinary the amount of equity that people have right now. So yeah, again, there will be some, but basically people will be far better off selling their houses than going into foreclosure. And there's lots of demand for those houses right now. So I really don't expect it to be an enormous deal. You'll see some. Let's hope I'm right about that.
That sounds good. It was a disaster the last time.
Yeah. Well, as I said, let's hope I'm right about this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. Oh, there's something.
Yeah, you can answer the questions in the chat, Richard, if you'd like.
Okay, how do we provide more opportunities for Black homeownership? Oh, I didn't show you my last slide, which I should have. I actually think technology can help. And I am a big fan of changing how we do underwriting altogether. If people, and we have the tools to do it that we didn't use to do it. So if people have paid their rent every month for 3 years, they've demonstrated that they're really, and let's say they're paying 40 or 50% of their income in rent every month for 3 years, they're a good credit risk. And there is a way now that we can know this, which is that people give permission to lenders to look at people's checking accounts. You could see, did that $2,250 a month check go out every month on schedule? And if it did, that's very powerful evidence that you have a responsible borrower who's going to make their payments. I give that as a particular example. I think the way I think some of the tech companies are really improving. I mean, I think Quicken, I think Loan Depot have done really good work. I don't think they're far enough along yet, by the way, but they have basically changed by coming up with proprietary algorithms that allow, I mean, you have to give them permission, but they allow that they are allowed to go and look at your whole financial picture. That tells people a lot more than FICO and other traditional measures. So I think the key is, and I've actually done work along these lines, there are some very good risk African-American borrowers who are shut out of the market because of the current way this is done. I'll give another example. One that's really important is contractor income is discounted relative to W-2 income. And there's no evidence, if you have had contractor income steadily for 3 years, you are just as safe a borrower as somebody with W-2 income, with a salaried income. People with salaries get fired. Now, I understand if you had contractor income, you know, you're a realtor and you've sold one house, okay, that's not good enough. But if you're a realtor and you've been selling houses for 5 years, and year after year, you're making $120,000, $140,000 a year, that tells you what you need to know about that borrower. The sort of, and I won't say current, but the standard underwriting systems we have in place don't allow for that. And African Americans disproportionately are renters, disproportionately are contractors. And so using technology to fix those things, I think, is really critical. The other thing I've changed my mind about is the need for a substantial down payment. The most successful mortgage program through the global financial crisis, the great financial crisis, was the VA program.
Mhm.
The VA program requires no money down. Now, VA loans are really well underwritten. So I'm not talking about no underwriting. I'm talking about strong underwriting with limited down payment. Now, yeah, I mean, what does equity do? It protects you from house prices falling, and that is important, but it doesn't necessarily protect you from, it doesn't necessarily reveal a good borrower, it doesn't necessarily protect you from a bad borrower to a point. And so I think we need to rethink down payment. Now, again, what we did with subprime stuff is we had no down payment and then a whole lot of other nonsense too. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who demonstrably will pay their bills. The metaphor I use is when you drive a new car off a lot, you basically are underwater on your loan. And people generally don't default on their car loans unless something bad happens to them, because you know what? They need the car. People need a place to live. So, okay, there are a bunch of questions now, so I don't know how much time I'm happy to answer all of them. They're very good, but
We have until 11 o'clock, so you can probably go through.
okay, but you said you wanted a panel, so
Yeah, at 11:30, we're gonna have three of our BIA members kind of react to your presentation and give us some info on what they shared. And we'd love for you to hang in there if you have time to hear
I'm
what
afraid I don't. I have a meeting, so, but okay. How significant is lower home owning among Black student geography? Okay, that's why I control for location. So I put in a flag basically saying where you live within something called a PUMA. PUMAs have about 100,000 people. So take the 40 million people of California and divide them into 100,000 person pods, if you will. So that's, what is that? There's 400 of them that I identify. So like LA County has 10 million people. So there are 100, I'm putting you in one of 100 places in LA County. Now, is it less than perfect? Yes. But is it pretty good? Yes, pretty good. So I actually have taken that into account. What is needed to make Governor Newsom's goal of building more houses effective? Okay, I don't know. I wish I knew. I don't know. You guys got to figure that one out. You know, again, I would say you want your kids to be able to live in California. Seems the thing that has the most resonance. And you know, the other thing about home building that we don't do a good enough job selling is if you don't have a college degree, what are the best jobs you can get? It's home building in terms of pay, anyway. Become a roofer, you become a framer, become an electrician, you become a plumber. You can make a pretty good living. And I don't think that message has gotten out enough. But I also think, you know, the thing that's encouraging when we look at young people, they have a much greater propensity to be YIMBYs instead of NIMBYs. So we are seeing a flight from the cities to the suburbs and out of California. What are you seeing in terms of flight out of California? I think the reason people are leaving, so there's the short run stuff, COVID. So why would you spend money on an expensive apartment in downtown LA or the middle of San Francisco if there are no amenities, you don't have to go to an office? I mean, there's no reason to spend the money. I do think once the amenities come back and people come back to work in offices, and I do think they will, they may only come in 3 days a week, but they are still going to need to be together in offices. You will see those central cities get people back is the power of central cities has been with us going back to the times of, Baghdad 5,000 years ago. There's a reason for it. What we're doing now is fine. It's not the same as being in the room together. We don't have the accidental conversations together. I do think people will be back, whether it's in a year or 5 years, I can't tell you, but they will be back. But I think the thing that's pushing the flight out of California more than anything else is we don't have enough houses for people. We have more doubling up than any other state in the country. If you're a $50,000 a year person, it's miserable to live here because you're either paying way too much of your income in housing or you have a miserable commute. Phoenix looks really good to you. The two biggest destinations for Californians are Las Vegas and Phoenix, which I almost call bedroom communities for California. People want to be close to their families here, but live a decent standard of living. Those are natural places to go. What we've been seeing is the flight is overwhelmingly among people who make less than $50,000 a year. And to me, people think it's a tax story. California has very steeply progressive taxes. They don't pay a lot of taxes here if you're in that. It's sales tax is high, but their income taxes are very low. I think it's all about housing. Baby boomers are counting on high prices for home sales for retirement. Will younger buyers be able to purchase those high prices? It's a great question. I mean, what we've observed in the last 6 months is what I'll say is this K-shaped recovery is talented people who can do work online have been doing just great. And by the way, one of the areas of greatest growth in California for 10 years now is people making more than $200,000 a year. Astonishingly large number of people in that income category. So remember, the home buyer at the margin is not the person in the middle, it's the person toward the top. And they're making the money. And so with the lower interest rates, as I said, they can be where I think prices can be where they are right now. I don't expect them to go up a whole lot more, but where they are right now is plenty for baby boomers if they want to retire and again move to Vegas or Oregon or something. And again, given how few houses we're building, I just don't see a circuit of supply being an issue anytime in the foreseeable future. Yeah, so the thing about the price rise and affordability gap increasing, the one thing, there is a limit. So this comes back to the last question. Looking at where incomes are, looking at where house prices are, and I think interest rates will go up, not a lot, but a little bit. But I mean, if mortgage rates go back to 3.5, which is still low by the standards that we're used to, very low, I don't see we're going to see a lot more increase in prices from here on. I think slow, steady increases from here, because again, you can only get so much blood out of it. You can't get blood out of the turnip, right? I'm sorry, or out of a rock, or whatever metaphor you want to use. I think there is a limit, but that said, I used to think there was a limit on London. But London went up year after year after year. But the big difference between London and here is we don't have a lot of Russian oligarchs investing in California, thank God. We don't have, the Chinese money is pretty much gone. And so, yeah, I don't see house prices going up a whole lot more from here.
All right. Any other questions for Dr. Green? All right, I'm not seeing any.
Okay.
In the chat box. So again, thank you, Dr. Green, for joining us today. Excellent presentation, as always, very insightful. We appreciate what you bring to the BIA, and your background really helps us with our decision making. So a lot of challenges ahead on the supply side for sure. A lot of upside on the sales front from the short term, like you were saying. I think interest rates are a key motivator and will continue to be so. So for the most part, good information. I think we have our marching orders as an organization is to create some more of that supply, which is not easy here in California. So we'll keep working on that one. So with that, I think we'll move on from the forecast presentation and Dr. Green's Q&A to the panelist discussion, Diana, if you're okay with that. So I know, Dr. Green, you said you had another meeting, so I know
I got to run at 11, so it's good seeing you all. Take care.
All right. Yeah, thank you again. So
All right.
we'll see you soon.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So for the panel part of our discussion, I'd like to introduce our two event committee co-chairs. First, Lisa Treble with Duck Testers and Christy Irving with Gothic Landscape. I see you guys waving at me. Thank you. Really appreciate your work with this event. It's awesome when we can get together and listen to Dr. Green. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you guys, and you can talk about next steps for us. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Elisa Trouble with Duck Testers. I'm a co-chair of the events committee with Christy, as Dave just said. Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Irving with Gothic Landscape, and I'd like to say thank you very much for everybody coming here today. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Diana. Thanks, Dr. Green, even though he's left already. We have a panel of 3 people who are in the builders that I think have some great insight to some of the things that we've heard today and can add on to what we've heard. Donna Deutschman, President and CEO of Homes for Families. Mark Ellett, Vice President of Acquisitions with Comstock Homes. And Dave Little, Vice President of Project Management, TriPoint Homes. I'd like all of you to say hi and introduce yourselves. Elisa, you want to start with your questions?
So our first question to our panel is based off of everything you heard today that Dr. Green discussed. What was your overall impression as related to your company, as well as what's your experience going on in the market in comparison? And we can start with Mark, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, sure. Good morning. Mark Ellett with Comstock. Thanks for inviting me. Great discussion with Dr. Green, fellow Trojan, so I can never criticize anything he says. But it was a little surprising. I was a little shocked that it was so demographically oriented. They were talking more about demographics than it was economics. So everything I think I prepared has just gone out the window because I'm definitely more of a macroeconomics guy. But you know, I think from the discussion, I think we're all aware that there's a lack of supply and there's still strong demand for housing. So I think in the short run, I think that's a great sign for our industry. And just for me, the other thing that he kept talking about is the affordability in California. I wish he maybe talked a little bit more California focused than in general, because I think, as always, affordability is going to be somewhat the issue here for people. And you know, who would have thought that almost 12 months into a pandemic, we're sitting here in an industry that's probably got it just about as good as it gets right now. We've got mortgage rates at next to zero. We've got strong demand. We've got lack of supply, and it's just, you know, it's pushing us all to be working harder than we've ever worked. And someone said something to me the other day that really stuck with me. Was, I think everybody's trying to get 6 months of work into 1 month right now in our industry because everybody's so busy. So, like I said, short run, I think from the presentation, it looks great from a supply and demand standpoint. I'm just concerned that affordability is going to become an issue. And again, Dr. Green kept mentioning that he doesn't see prices going, you know, too much further from here. So I would agree with that. I think people are going to get to that point that if housing prices do go too much higher from here, we're going to see a lot more people in Boise, Idaho, Las Vegas, Phoenix, et cetera, because we're not seeing the wage growth. You know, our economy, I don't want to keep talking about this, I could talk about it all day, but our economy was not that strong before COVID. If we noticed, the economy was starting to slow down back in January of 20. And so I think we have to be aware that, you know, our economy today is definitely being stimulated heavily. And my biggest concern is, you know, what happens when all that stimulus goes away. But I know that's the second question coming up, so I'm going to let somebody else jump in here.
Dave, you wanna add to that?
Sure. Thanks, Mark, for those opening comments. I would say that we are seeing things consistent with Dr. Green's presentation right now. I think in the near term, we've had a tremendous sales success, and especially in LA and Ventura County, where I operate mostly. And but I do see there are affordability issues, and when you raise prices in a high price part of the country 10% inside of 12 months, largely as a tool to try and slow down, because we are trying to do 6 months worth of work in 1 month, I think that gets unsustainable at the pace we're at, right? So we do need to focus on affordability more. We've released, we have a line of products that ranges from median income housing targeted product all the way to luxury product. And every single one of those product lines is moving really well right now. On the higher end, it's because of the equity people are enjoying and the market uptick, right? That always happens. But so they're trading properties, right? So they can get away with that for the time being. But when rates go up and pricing maybe softens a little bit, that part of the buying public goes away or goes down significantly. And so then we're left with trying to find new buyers, which are the folks that Dr. Green alluded to in his presentation, which are not our buyers today. And so that affordability is something that we all need to address. So far, it's been okay for us. And then just personally, we develop all of the lots we're selling in LA County right now, we developed ourselves. And so we have a little pricing advantage on the cost side of the lot costs that way. But as we move forward, that is not going to be that way forever. And as we try to get into retail purchase situations, which we're already in LA County, that pricing pressure is going to have a bigger impact on our ability to continue at any kind of pace. And so we just have to focus on that part of it. And things like VMT and other legislative constraints placed on us as California builders kind of fly in the face with this new logic of, hey, I can work from home 2 to 3 to 4 days a week. And I think our political climate needs to pivot, like we've had to pivot as builders, to address some of the harnesses that were placed on us as suburban developers, because those concerns have been alleviated quite a bit with the pivot industries had to do with their workforce. And so I think we have a runway ahead of us that's pretty open. But so the 1 to 2 years, I think we're going to be strong in California development. 3 to 5 years, if we don't figure some of this stuff out, there's going to be a wholesale change in the way housing works in California. And I don't think it's positive for large developers, much less the small infill developers. So I think we have a lot of work to do. But for the near term, I agree with Dr. Green. I think we've got a strong 21. We had a really strong 20. I think 22, the variable there is interest rates. And as long as they stay somewhat tempered, I think 22 even looks okay for most of the industry down here. It's beyond that concerns me. So there you go. Back to you, Lisa and Christy.
So Donna, I think that was a great segue for you, and can speak about the affordability side of it.
Absolutely. And thank you, Christy and Alyssa and Gothic as well, and Duck Testers, your core companies, for everything you do for the BIA. You really run great events. First of all, I want to talk about the fact that Dr. Green spoke about residential investment forecasting the economy. He spoke about it at the mega level. But in fact, if we look at the community level and which communities show the best economies, it's always ones with great home ownership or great businesses. And at the micro level, and what we do in terms of affordable home ownership, we're looking at the fact that home ownership really provides the ability to move up the economic ladder to individuals and to families. And as he said, home ownership is most predicted by a parent owning a home, and getting into that market stabilizes what your payments are. So if you're always chasing the increase in rent, then you're never able to really utilize improvement in wages or anything else in your life to really maximize what you can do in your life to move up the economic ladder. One of the things that we didn't touch on, and he didn't, is the cost of the commodities this year. Even though housing prices, and we've been able to build a lot, we have too, the commodities like lumber, cement, particularly lumber this year, and I know our home builders will agree with me, have been astronomically increased because of what's going on with COVID. So our costs have been increasing so high. And honestly, we wouldn't be able to do it without subsidy at the affordable home ownership level. Most affordable home ownership is either getting subsidies through state programs or through donations. In our case, it's a mixture of both. And we need to do that because we need to keep the cost of the homes low. And that's how people get into the home ownership market, but it is critical. In the case of Dr. Green, he talked about the VA loans, which are not available to certain entities. In his case, he talked about them being kept from the Black community. In our case, we've seen them being kept from low-income veterans in general. And so we've had to create a program with the state entity, the Department of Veteran Affairs, as well as with our donors and ourselves, to allow low-income veterans to get funding for home ownership. The other thing that I don't see being possible is, in order to build affordable homes, it's really best to do them in large numbers to get the discounts in costs. And so what he talked about was buy right land. And that's virtually impossible, at least in California, to get in order to do to get the building power and discounts of a tract. So to get homes to be affordable, we have to build tracts. And tracts on buy right land are virtually impossible. I don't know if the other builders have found such land near jobs and work, but we've not been able to.
Dave or Mark, do you want to cover that one?
Go
I
ahead,
think
Mark.
we're ready for the next question.
Okay.
The answer to your question for us, Donna, is no, we have not had success.
Okay. So our next question to you guys is, does anything in Dr. Green's presentation or in your perception of the future economy have an impact on your company's land acquisition opportunities?
Can we start with Mark on that one too? It's
Sure.
up his alley for sure.
Mark?
Mark, we can't hear you.
Yeah, it's odd. It doesn't say you're muted, but we can't hear what you're saying.
Maybe I have to unmute his phone number. He might have a phone number dial in. Laura, can you help him unmute his phone number here?
I've asked him to unmute it, but he has to still do it.
Thank you.
There we go. I think we're coming back.
Mark, it's on your phone because I think you called in. So if you could go on your phone, and I've requested to unmute. So you just need to potentially accept that.
You may have to hit *6 potentially.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There we go.
That's strange because I wasn't muted when my mute button wasn't on, but for some reason I had to hit *6, so I apologize for that. But yeah, as far as land acquisition opportunities, obviously, you know, in a market like we're in today, you know, land is a hot commodity. We're not making any more of it, so it is not easy to find and to purchase at a price that makes sense. And you know, I've been in this business for quite some time now, probably 20 years doing acquisitions work, and I always tell people that unfortunately land sellers, when they see home prices going up and up, they just assume that land prices are going to go up and up along with it, which to some point is correct. But at the same time, the way costs have been recently and the commodities prices, as those prices continue to rise and probably rise quicker on a percentage basis than home prices can, the one variable that can adjust to negatively to make it still affordable to build is land. But if you try to explain that to a land seller, he doesn't want to hear that, and he moves on to the next person pretty quickly. So it is a struggle today, especially in California. We know we're very land constrained, especially in the markets that a lot of people wanted to live in pre-COVID. Now with COVID and the move to suburbia, there's some more opportunities opening up. Riverside County is doing really well. San Bernardino County is doing really well. So there are opportunities to kind of spread further afield. But as Dr. Green said, he believes, and I do to a point, that people, once COVID is controlled, will start coming back to the city. So then your issue is, do you want to be tying land up in areas that may not be as demand driven here in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, depending on how long it takes to control COVID. So I think you've got to be controlling your risk on that. Comstock is very fortunate. We do a lot of entitlement work. We're not just home builders. So we're looking further afield, and we're also optioning some land opportunities that help control the risk. So from an entitlement standpoint, we feel like as long as we control where we're purchasing land, there's some great opportunity. And I think, the one other thing I want to point before I let somebody else speak is, from a regulation standpoint, again, Dr. Green pointed to the fact that regulation is an issue in California especially, and we all would agree that is certainly the case and really hurts affordability. But at the same time, from an entitler standpoint, if you can get product entitled, it adds a lot of value. So from our standpoint, being an entitler as well as a builder, there is opportunity there as well to, tie up land, entitle land, and make profitability that way. Do I see land prices coming down anytime quickly? I don't. In the short run, I think the housing industry is going to have a little bit of a boom time here. In the long run, I have a slightly different view, but I think that's a different question. So I'll stop there and hand it over to Dave.
Thank you. I pretty much see it the same way on our side over here. To me, the bigger question isn't just our local markets either. For the multi-state public builders, which I work for, one of them, TriPoint, I think the bigger challenge for us locally is it's the allocation of capital to their overall portfolio, right? If their land committee continues to see margins erode here because of high land prices and huge entitlement hurdles and regulatory challenges, I think as a state, the public markets are going to look to states like Idaho. A couple of you have mentioned Idaho, Austin, Nashville, all these, Charlotte, these areas where the entitlement process isn't as risky or as excruciating and not as costly. And so there's a micro question to that, which is, we are looking at a lot of entitlement opportunities on smaller lot count projects. We have to be competitive in the markets we want to continue to operate in here in California. The bigger picture, we basically have one land committee in divisions all over the US. And so we have to be able to justify the allocation of capital to this state versus other states. And our ability to do that gets a little bit hampered with the constant political pressure we have, a regulatory burden that we get handed. So it gets back to my earlier comment. We've got to address it, or else our region here will continue to shrink just because it's a business decision above our pay grades, right? So it's kind of a twofold question. Yeah, Donna?
Land for us is a very complicated issue because a lot of times we'll get city-related land, but then we go into Davis-Bacon. And we do everything we can to avoid Davis-Bacon. So then if we purchase land, we face the same issues as the private builders in terms of cost and the entitlement processes. So we're looking at which is actually less expensive, and sometimes it's the purchase of land. You know, we do anything we can to avoid Davis-Bacon.
So the last question we have for our panelists is, how do you think that the information we heard today will change the selling and marketing of homes in the long term? Mark, you want to start?
Yeah, and I just because I want to go back, because there was a question number 2 that we didn't touch on, but which is, you know, what we're most optimistic about and what we're most concerned about. So I think, you know, that's an important one for everybody listening to talk about. For me, you know, optimism wise, the supply and demand ratios right now seem to be strongly in our favor. My big question that I think about a lot, and I think other people should think about it a lot, is, you know, where is it going to go from here? When you kind of step back and look at the American economy and what's going on with fiscal stimulus and monetary stimulus, my concern is if we ever get back to normal, that could be the worst thing for us, because we look at, you know, price discovery has disappeared in the stock market. Prices in the real estate market have you know, expanded so much more quickly than would be normal in a normal market. And my concern is when the Fed goes away, if it ever does, and if the fiscal stimulus stops, where do interest rates go? You know, they're not going to get any better from here. Mortgage rates tend to float around 1.7% above 10-year treasuries, so I don't see them going much lower. And if all this stimulus does cause inflation and interest rates have to rise, what does that do for our industry? Now, I'm not saying I have all the answers right now, but these are the things that I tend to think about from an economic standpoint, is how is that going to affect our industry when the, you know, kind of when the music stops and there aren't enough chairs for everybody to sit on. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. You know, the other thing I noticed on a call the other day was, you know, FHA limits in California getting challenged again. I noticed that in Riverside County, that even townhomes now are going above FHA limits, which is showing us that, you know, pricing is definitely getting steep. And as we said in this industry for many, many years, people drive east until they can qualify. And my guess is some people are having to drive quite far east right now to be able to qualify based on where pricing's going. So another thing to just be pondering. As far as, you know, things that are going to change the industry going forward from a selling and marketing standpoint, I think we've all got to pay attention to technology. You know, it's here. Social media is here. I think we've all paid attention to what happened with GameStop and the Wall Street Bets crowd. Well, they can do that to any industry. If there's enough people on social media communicating and working together to affect something, it can happen now quite quickly and quite easily. So I think we have to be aware of the technology that's out there and how we can benefit from it to help us. The other thing that interests me was, you know, how Dr. Green talked about, you know, the focus can't be on the stereotypical, you know, white population. The diversity now we've got to look at, not only from, you know, racial, cultural. There's so much diversity, especially in California, that we've really got to pay attention to and try to figure out who the home buyers really are. And then the last thing I will say is, with an aging population, people are staying in their homes a lot longer. Aging people don't spend money. They don't buy houses like younger people do. And I think that's something to pay attention to, because it's which may be a benefit as well, but it's going to mean new housing is going to need to come on because people aren't selling the existing housing. They're staying put. So new supply needs to take its place. So really, those are my comments. I think it's just a matter of paying attention and using technology to its best. And technology changes so quickly right now, you've really got to be paying attention to what the next great thing is, because it'll be on us and being used before we can even get up to speed on it.
Dave, what are you optimistic about, and what do you foresee how things are going to change in selling and marketing?
So again, I kind of mentioned earlier, I think the next 18 to 24 months, we're optimistic about the pace that we'll enjoy. I think most of us have tied up the land that we need to tie up for this year's business plan, next year's business plan, and maybe into 23. So I'm optimistic that we have a pretty long runway, like I said before, with at least a decent pace. And I think Dr. Green's right. We had a huge price uptick in the second half of 2020. I think we don't see that again. I think we see some pretty stable prices, maybe moderate increases, but So I'm optimistic about the, 21's results and into 22, barring anything unforeseen. And again, rates staying pretty consistent, which most everybody feels they will. In terms of selling and marketing going forward, I agree with Mark's comments. We literally had a grand opening scheduled for March 14th, and on the 13th, the governor shut the state down last year in March. And so we literally had a brand new community with a brand new set of models that was shut down. And so we had to pivot very quickly to a new game plan on how to and I have to say that I think we've always had a pretty we placed a high emphasis on technology and trying to be out in front of it as best we can, although as Mark says, it changes overnight, it seems. I think everybody needs a 14 or 15-year-old on staff as your digital marketing expert, because they seem, whenever I run into a question and I'm like a term I don't know, I ask my 15-year-old, I'm like, what the heck is that? And he looks at me like, well, duh. So it's like, okay, we need to tap into our youth. But in all seriousness, in that particular community, we had to switch to an entire digital experience overnight, right? And so it was a fundamental shift in what happens when we open models again. What do those models look like going forward? Do we do appointment only or not? And so we actually sold one of those homes completely virtually in the 2 weeks we were shut down. And that, in California, everything from the escrow deposit process to contract stuff to creating a virtual tour that a buyer is comfortable living in Texas and buying a home in California as a reload, right? All of that were things we had to focus on extremely quickly. And we were sort of working on it, but it lit a fire that I don't think we were expecting to move that to more of the finish line. Now, we're looking going forward at, hey, our buyers love appointment only situations because they get private time with our new home advisor. And so now how do you balance that from the buyer that just decided to take a drive from Beaumont to Santa Clarita to go look at a model complex to find a close sign on them during business hours because they're appointment only, right? So we got to figure out how to message that and how to handle that. But we're going through that with a combination of open hours and appointment only hours, so that our appointments have that private experience, but there's still an opportunity for the walk-ins that are touring around models on a particular day and don't want to be tied to a schedule. And so it's things like that we just had to figure out in days instead of weeks and years. Also, there's not only the ethnic challenges in trying to open up our digital and other marketing efforts to different parts of our California society. It's also the age groups, right? The under 20, the millennials. So for us, it's been a process of trying to match our offering to the targeted age range as well as the targeted gender or racial backgrounds, right? So for us, it's been a merchandising effort, and the younger the buyers are, the more digital friendly they are, and the more digital expectations they have. They never go to an Apple store to buy a phone or an iPad, right? So why would they go to a model complex to buy a house? They order a car and it shows up at their front yard, right? So it's been attracting that millennial buyer, and it's actually worked for us. We had a community up in Santa Clarita that we had probably in the first year of operations, over half of our buyers were millennial aged, which I never thought I would see happen that quickly. So it's a combination of a lot of things that we have to constantly pivot to adjust to. So Donna?
Make sure my thing is off. Okay. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of questions in the new buying groups and the minorities. I think for us, there was a big lag in the VA loans that are actually what we took advantage of in developing our model, because we were able to work with CalVet to fund veterans who previously were not able to be funded by VA loans. And that included the Black community. But I think that as we move forward, what a lot of government, FHA, VA, even Calvet loans do not fund, and this may get at some of the demographics he was looking at, is unmarried couples. Even unmarried couples with 2 or 3 children cannot be funded by some of these kinds of loans. And I think as we move forward into the future, people are having
Fine, I got Lindsay on the phone.
people are having multiple children together and not getting married and living together for 15, 20 years before they do get married or don't get married. And there has to be some kind of changes in the mortgage industry to allow for that in terms of first-time home buyers, because there are barriers to that that may account for the demographics. The down payment, definitely in California, has got to shift to a lower down payment because it doesn't have to do with the ability or willingness of somebody to pay regularly. So we have to look at that. I'm not saying it should be 0, but it has to be changed in order to get some new home buyers into the affordable market. 20% is not a standard when you're talking about, or even 10% when you're talking about a young couple who's coming into a $650,000 house, which is, an average cost in the San Fernando Valley. The other thing is that I actually see as an opportunity that's going to be coming up is as certain communities age in place, particularly the Valley region, the houses are 55 to 60 years old. We used to talk 10 years ago about them being 45 years old. So I'm just doing simple math there, and it may be a little bit off. When they age out of their homes, these homes are going to need major renovation, if not knockdowns. So we're building ADUs on sites that the homes are so old, if they're not getting fully renovated, there's going to need to be something done with all these homes in the next 10 years because people are aging in place and they're not doing major renovation.
Thank you, everyone. So thank you very much to Dave with TriPoint and Donna with Homes for Family and Mark with Comstock. We're going to open up the Q&A. So does anyone have any, do we have any in the chat, or does anyone want to ask a question? We have time for one more question. Nobody else? Okay. Any final thoughts from any of you? The 3 of you?
I just wanted to thank you guys for having me be a part of it. It's always good to listen to the chapter representatives and our local leaders speak on some of these matters that are so critical to our local and larger economy. So thank you. Thank you guys for putting it together.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I really appreciate it, enjoyed it. And I think one thing I would just say to everybody is get involved with the BIA, get involved with understanding what comes out of Sacramento, get involved with trying to change what comes out of Sacramento. Because as I mentioned earlier, with social media and how groups of people can make things happen, I think at the BIA, they're doing a great job of making things happen. And I think if we all pitch in, we can really bring the change to one of the biggest hurdles in the California home building industry, which is the regulation that makes it so difficult to, bring the necessary supply online. And the more supply we can bring online, also we can provide more affordability in that housing as the supply and demand curve changes. So, please get involved, support your fellow home builders and people in the industry. It's as I tell people, California is a big geographic area, but the home building industry is really a small industry where everybody knows everybody. So try to support each other and let's try to do great things.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to leave it to Diana to close us out, and thank you all for being here today. Thank you to our panelists and Dr. Green, and I look forward to seeing you in real life soon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much to Elisa and Christy. You guys always do a great job, like Donna mentioned, and thank you to our panelists. Just really quickly, I want to give a shout out to SoCal Gas for sponsoring today's event. As you saw, Rena I think she's still on the call now. She put up a lot of great numbers for you to utilize as a resource. I know I worked with her and her team to troubleshoot a lot of problems you guys may face. And if you have any questions on some of the things she presented, she's always there and available for you. I also want to thank our 2021 partnership sponsors, which are on that slide to your left. A lot of you guys are on this call, and nothing we do this year would be possible without any of it. So we appreciate it. And there's still opportunity to sign up for your 2021 sponsorship. The tickets you would have gotten for today will be maybe for another event down the line. We can work that out. Just feel free to contact me or Laura. Thanks for everyone coming today. I will keep you posted on the events we have for you in March. Again, everything's virtual for now, but as soon as things open up, we'll make sure you guys are the first to know about it. And this does conclude our program. Thank you, Dave, as always, for facilitating a great event. And thank you all. Let us know if you have any questions.
Excellent.
Bye, everybody.
Great job, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dave.
Mhm.